Dearly beloved, we have gathered here today to pay our respects, to honor, to bless, and to say goodbye to our beloved and respected friend, Sacred Cow. Our colleague, our friend, and our constant companion and crutch. Sacred Cow has served us well so very long. Helped us to stay comfortable, safe, stagnant, dormant, and dull. Always been there as the easy go-to, the steady rock of outdated, inactive, and listless excuses. Oh, Sacred Cow will be sorely, sorely missed. As we pry our tightly clenched hands from around his horns, we cannot help but be just a little misty-eyed. For our beloved substitute for growth will no longer be available for us to hide behind. This is such a difficult time for many of us. Some of us who have never, ever entertained a question, a critique, or, God forbid, a desire to evolve. Oh, the years of blind obedience. We were supposed to change a slide at that moment. I hope that there will be a slide change because that's a good laugh. You see, I'm slightly attached to the Sacred Cow of the slides changing when I want them to change. Oh, the years of blind obedience to outdated customs, conventions, and addictions that we will deeply grieve today. Sacred Cow will forever live on in our rationalizations, for it is there that Sacred Cow has always lived. Oh, yes, now, all that remains is the smell of Hamburger that will forever haunt us in those most stressful times of life. Here's a reality. You cannot receive the good of today, of the now moment. You cannot receive the good of tomorrow if your hands are full of the waste of yesterday, of the trash of yesterday. Now, let's not use just trash because there's a lot of good yesterday. But if you're holding on to yesterday as the only source of your good and your empowerment and your growth, your hands are full. There's nothing to hold on to. Things are falling between your fingers. Evolution requires sacrifice. Breathe that in for a minute. Evolution requires sacrifice. Growth requires movement. Growth on the spiritual path requires, I've still got that southern accent going. I don't know what's going on there. It requires letting go. The spiritual path requires a willingness to release and sometimes walk away from things that perhaps at one point were very comfortable. Things at one point that were probably very, very important for your evolution. Things at one point that were absolutely necessary for you to become the person that you are today. But there comes a time, if you're on an evolutionary path, where you have to let the reign of the Sacred Cow go with gratitude in your heart and wisdom for the next step. Now, is it possible to have gratitude and wisdom be in the same field? I'm saying without it, you have an imbalanced system. The 12 powers of humanity have all kinds of divine ideas that must be in balance. I'm saying today there must be a balance between gratefulness, grateful for where I have been, for what I have learned, for what has been brought into my field, that I may let it go, with the wisdom to know that its purpose is no longer necessary in my life. I move to a greater thing. I feel very far away from you. I'm going to go ahead and move closer. I like being close to you. There we go. That's so much better. I felt like a million miles away from you. I'm a little attached to you as well, I guess. The spiritual path requires us to be willing to let go of things that once were important that have suddenly become anchors, have suddenly become hindrances. Sacred cows are those things that you have unconsciously integrated into the fabric of your life in such a way, and let me underline the word unconsciously, that they are now in the way. And it's contrary to the human ego. The human ego E-G-O, edging God out. You've all heard that 100 times. We have all these sacred cows around us, and we think that they're protecting us. They're keeping us safe, but the reality is they are the veritable blocks between you and the next step and the next chapter in your evolution. They're the ideas, the thoughts, the habits, the patterns in your life that have become beyond question, beyond reproach. God forbid somebody introduce into the field a different idea than the one that you were holding right now, and you get a little bit defensive, and you pull out the sword to defend it. Yet it is in defensivelessness that we grow and emerge. This is what the Buddha had to say. Don't take my word for it. Let's go to some of the great thinkers of all time. Can you read that okay in the cursive? Do your best. This is what it says. Together, those who cling to perceptions and views wander the world offending people. So here's an idea that Buddha is putting out, that if you are attached to a certain view, a certain belief system, that you're not willing to let go of, you're holding on with clenched fingers on those horns, you're not only blocking your good, but you are in the environment of your friends and your family, you are blocking the portal by which God can be realized through you for your friends and your family as well. You are offending people. Your playing small is not only offending your own divine spiritual Christ nature, it's offending the nature of those around you that see and behold the magnificence of your soul that you're not willing to see because you got your herd all around you. You're living in the corral, holding on to the horns and going, this is what's more important than my evolving. Talk is cheap. And I say that the religious environment that we know today has not evolved. And that if we want to be on a growing path, we need to look at old structures with gratitude in our heart for what they have meant to us, but know that God is forever evolving. God is forever speaking. Like ripples upon the pond, it is growing bigger and bigger and bigger. But don't just take Buddha's word for it. Let's go to Islam. The last Islamic prophet of Islam, Ali Tabib, said this. Read it with me. Detachment is not that you should own nothing, but that nothing should own you. Here's the litmus test. Is your life a series of habits and patterns that are now owning you? Unbudgeable, unmovable attachments to the way life is supposed to be, to the way God is supposed to be, the family is supposed to be, my religion is supposed to be. That habit is now owning you. At some point, it was a new idea, entered into your field, and you brought that sacred cow into your corral, and you began to use it as a tool, as an instrument to evolve, to become, to recognize, to discover facts and truth about yourself and about other people and about the world as a whole. And eventually we go unconscious. And that idea gets buried deep, deep within, and it's running your life. The tapes that are running in the consciousness, the subconscious mind, in the habits of your life are running your life. That's the litmus test, but we're going to explore that just a little bit further. I'm reminded of the story of the monk. There was a monk, and he was on his quest for enlightenment. He was going on a journey to enlightenment, and he walked, and he came across a giant river, a beautiful, expansive river that he knew he could not swim across. He needed a boat to get there. And he walked up and down the shore, and he found the most magnificent boat, a beautiful canoe, finely appointed with decorations, sturdy and strong, and a paddle that beckoned him in. God has answered my prayers. Yes, what I need to get to the other side has been provided. He got into the boat, and he began to fall in love with that boat. It was so magnificent. It felt so good as he sat in it, and it made its way through the current of the river with ease, with peace, and with grace. And it finally got him safely to the other side of the river. And then the monk comes to the crossroads of decision. I love this boat so much. This boat is so valuable to me to get across the river. I must decide to leave it here that maybe somebody else can use it. Or I'm feeling the desire to pick up the boat and continue my journey to enlightenment because it's so beautiful. Well, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer to the monk. I will not make it on my journey to enlightenment if I'm carrying the heavy load of the boat. Yet so many of us on the spiritual path are so attached to ancient ways, old ways that absolutely we can be grateful for, but there is an evolving humanity, an evolving earth, an evolving spirituality. There comes a time where we go, thank you for the boat. It's beautiful. I'm going to give it to somebody else that I may continue my journey, because I won't make it to enlightenment as long as I'm attached to that boat, to that sacred cow. Do we have any gardeners in the room? A couple of you. That is my sanctuary. My sanctuary is getting my hands into Mother Earth and digging deeply into Mother Earth. And I had to learn very quickly, those trees that I love, my neighbors can't stand it because I don't cut trees down. My yard is full of trees, and they curse me every fall when all my leaves blow into their yard. But the reality is, as a gardener, I had to learn very quickly, if I wanted healthy trees that were not falling upon my house, there needed to be some pruning. There was dead wood in the tree. And as I took off that which was no longer necessary for the tree to be healthy, the roots went deeper. No trees fall in my yard. The branches became more expansive. And the beauty of my yard with all of its trees was because there had been some pruning. Pruning is necessary. How many people love roses? I'm very proud. Our neighborhood also has the competition of who's got the best roses. And let me tell you, it's easy to see. The neighbor who has the best roses is the one that knows when to prune, when to cut off, when to deadhead. It is a constant process. It's not a one-time process. I go out every weekend. I've got some dead wood. I've got some dead flowers. I take them off. Next weekend, I've got brand new blooms. It's a natural and organic process. It's one that the master teacher Jesus absolutely understood. And it's happening whether you're cooperating with it or not. As a spiritual being, having made a commitment to your growth, pruning is happening, and it's either a fight against that process or it's a cooperation with it. Let's hear what Jesus had to say about it. In the Gospel of John, chapter 15, he knew and explained exactly what's going on organically within. Let's read it together. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. What's the matter? You got to think that through. Basically, let me give you the Reader's Digest version. The presence of God is moving in the direction of your health as a tree. As a beautiful tree, there's pruning going on. Things that are not necessary, the current of life, of spirit, is moving them away from you. But if you're holding on to them, guess what? You're getting dragged to the current and you're hitting the rocks on the way. There comes a time when we must go, I let it go. Some of us are not just holding on to the reins of a sacred cow, we're riding them. We're riding them on with a banner of pride. Yes, this is my cow, and my cow's the best cow. And I can't change from this cow. The poor cow is going to get off my back and let me die already. Now, oh, by the way, apologies to all the vegans. There were a couple of emails that came through that were so upset. This is a metaphor, people. Get over it. It's a metaphor. One of the most important processes on the spiritual path, if not the most important, is a regular practice of spiritual inventory. I don't just deadhead the roses once or twice. I don't just trim the trees once or twice. It is an ongoing process. What is mine to keep? What is mine to release? What is mine that is still serving my evolution, my spiritual knowledge, my relationship with the infinite, and that what is in the way of that ongoing experience and expression of the divine? So self-inventory, it means we have to be humble. We got to look at our stuff and make peace with some friends that maybe no longer are necessary. We do it with relationships. Anybody grown out of a relationship? This doesn't work for me anymore. That's cooperating with the system of God that says you've evolved, they've evolved, you're in a different place. There's nothing wrong with that. It's part of what we do. Yet when it comes to our habits, our patterns, and our rituals, and our attachments, we hold on to them with dear life and we ride them around the corral, wondering why life isn't working. So we do a regular process of self-inventory and self-reflection, taking stock of the sacred cows that are in our corral. Some of them may still absolutely be useful. Keep them, because they wouldn't fall under the category of sacred cow, just an important tool, a helpful tool for you to be all that you can possibly be. When I am holding on to what is no longer needed, I am actually not cooperating with the system that God has been put into place as life itself, as grace itself. I am fighting the current. And what does that mean? That means there's some stuff that needs to come to the altar of evolution, the altar of spiritual growth. And guess what? Getting rid of sacred cows is a process of grief. That's why I started with the memorial service. It is painful. There's anybody that promised you that the spiritual path was going to be easy lied to you. There is nothing easy about becoming the Christ. It involves crucifixions. It involves death. It involves saying goodbye to paradigms that no longer are necessary. Jesus was the great rebel and maverick that came onto the planet and shook things up and said, this is beautiful, it doesn't work anymore. That's fantastic. That served humanity for a long period of time. It doesn't work. I'm bringing a new idea. I'm bringing new eyes. I'm bringing new ears. And verily, verily, I say to you, pay attention. Because if you don't pay attention to what's coming out of my mouth, you're not cooperating with the system. And that process didn't stop when Jesus died. There have been prophets and sages and teachers and books and workshops written that are saying exactly the same thing. There's a message within your heart today that is saying the same thing. You know what needs to be gotten rid of. It doesn't serve anymore. And the Christ is saying, great, my brother, my sister, get rid of it. He who has ears, he who has eyes. There's a lot of us walking around riding our cattle around the corral looking like this. It is a recipe for danger, and it involves grief. Let's do a little self-inventory today. I'm going to ask you some questions because I can't tell you what your sacred cow is. That would be meddling. That would be spiritual malpractice. But I can create a container. We can create a container where we can do that self-inventory and just get real with each other. Let me ask you some questions. Here's a list of questions or ideas that I want you to consider. You might be aware of the ones that you say no to and be really aware of the ones that you say yes to. Is there any fear that exists within your system of stepping out of routine? It's the way we've always done things. If there is a fear there, there probably is a sacred cow. Am I unwilling to try something new? God forbid, let's just drive a different way to get to church today. No, it takes too long. We've always driven to church that way. You want to do a study? Study the seats that you all sit in. There's a little bit of attachment to where you're sitting in this room. I can almost tell you where you're going to be sitting before you even get into the room. And there was a moment, I'd love to watch. And somebody was coming up the aisle. They should remain nameless. And somebody was sitting in their chair. And they did this. And they grabbed their sacred cow and said, I'm not going to move. Here's a reality. Here's a reality. That's a simple joke, silliness. But we're walking through the planet doing the same thing. That's my chair. Don't take my chair away from me. I don't want to face the grief of giving up my chair. For God's sake, this view of me is just as good as this view of me. Don't you think? Is comfort my priority? Have you made your comfort the priority? That is the enemy of spiritual growth. If you're living in comfort zone for the last 5 years, you haven't grown for 5 years. Consider for a moment that the challenges of your life are the moment where light comes through, the moment where you stretch and you become more the Christ, more the Buddha, more the Atman. Have I stopped listening to others who have a different opinion? There's the big one in this environment. Somebody thinks differently than me, and I'm uncomfortable with that. And let me tell you, that's not just religion. That's politics. That's any view of your family. That's people at work that have a different system for getting things done. If you're uncomfortable with somebody bringing into your field a different idea, the problem exists within you, not within them. You've got a sacred cow somewhere in the corral. Is routine more important than mystery? You know, the greatest spiritual paths were born on mystery, the unknown, the not knowing. The greatest evolution of any thinker, of any spiritual sage, was living and leaning into the mystery. It is not in the known. So you have to take a look. Is routine more important than mystery in your life? There might be a sacred cow standing right behind you. Do I quickly walk away from uncomfortable challenges? Oh, you just said something I don't like. Toodaloo. Oh, this is feeling a little uncomfortable. Maybe I'll just run away. And that part of the brain that is fight or flight kicks in, and you walk away, and you've missed the opportunity to grow because you can't handle being uncomfortable. Am I overly attached to certain methods, formulas, or rituals? Let's get honest with each other. Why are you making the lasagna different tonight? You put mushrooms in my lasagna? Again, a silly, ridiculous metaphor, but the reality is, you sprinkle a new idea, and by the way, Unity North, we're about comforting the afflicted, but that's not growth. I am here to afflict the comfortable. I'm throwing mushrooms. I purposely throw mushrooms into your lasagna. I purposely open the corral door so that you can go out of here and think maybe there's something to it. If it bugged me that much, if it stung that much what the minister had to say, maybe you're going to make a shift and you're going to leave the corral, let go of the reins, put the boat down, and become more of the Christ that I know you to be. That's my job. I am not here to keep you comfortable. And let me own my sacred cow. If I piss you off a little bit, that used to be really uncomfortable for me. That cow is long gone from my corral. It's okay if I make you a little angry. Let's talk about it and be angry together and discover something beautiful and rich that wants to happen because we're willing to sit in the fire and be refined. Am I unwilling to be questioned? Think about your spouse, your partner, your mother-in-law, your father, your father-in-law, the people that question you. Why do you think that way? If that's uncomfortable for you, you got a sacred cow somewhere that just needs to be opened up and looked at. Do I go with the majority? There's a lot of, Unity attracts a lot of introverted people, and this is a big one right here. Do I go with the majority and never speak up? This is just what the crowd is doing. There's a lot of gang warfare going on in the spiritual world. It's just the way everybody's doing it, so I'll just go along. Even though I don't feel right in my heart, I don't speak up. I'm saying, speak up. You were just giving me all kinds of good mojo today. Rock on, dude. The reality is you got to speak up. If you're on a spiritual path, you're going to confront a sacred cow when it is uncomfortable to speak up. Let them out. Let them go. Go make some hamburger. Metaphorical hamburger. Go make a veggie burger. Is form or substance more important to me? Form or substance? Let me tell you, in this community, I just love it. Twice a year we do communion. And I love to watch, it's the parting of the Red Sea. We're going to do Thanksgiving communion. Half the church goes, oh my God, they're doing communion. And they go running for the hills. I can't stand communion. That's what my Catholic upbringing, and they run as far as they can because they're not willing to see with new eyes and new ears. And then the other half of the congregation goes running. They don't do it right there. That's not the way we've always done communion. It's not the way it's supposed to be done. They're wrecking that beautiful ritual. And let me tell you, one of the most beautiful services that we do is communion. About 35 of you show up. And that breaks my heart because that means there's sacred cows running rampant in the corral of our consciousness. This year, around Thanksgiving, when we do communion, I want to see a full house. And I want to see any sacred cows in the environment. Because the oneness that we teach, the oneness that we espouse, the oneness that we are all about will happen on communion, Wednesday night. It won't happen when you run for the hills because you're not willing to have the eyes and the ears. Is there room for an expansive awareness of God in your life? I don't know. Is there an expansive awareness, an attachment to always feeling good? Here's a big one that happens in New Thought churches. The spiritual path is not all about feeling good. And if you're attached to always feeling good, you're being kept stagnant. And if I get up here and my only job is to help you feel good, I'm keeping you stagnant and I'm codependent. Oh, you like me? You like me, that's great. But I'm keeping you in the corral with a whole bunch of sacred cows. It's okay to not feel good. It's okay to own it. It's okay to own that you're a human being. You're a spiritual being and you're having a human experience. And that human experience is necessary, and the human experience sometimes involves not feeling good. And here's one I did not put on the list up there. Am I telling the same story I told 5 years ago? Ooh, did you hear? Did you fear that? Did you feel that? Am I telling the same story I told 5 years ago? And I heard this, oh. And all of you looked at the person to your left. Now, did you answer no to all those questions? Is there anybody in the room that answered no to all of those ideas? If you answered no to all of them, good for you. Good on you. You're on the good path. You can go home now. But if there's one thing on there, only one thing that you answered yes to, I'm saying this is the week that you challenge it. This is the week that you face it. This is the week that you let go of the horns of the cow and go, I free you. I want to be more me. Thank you. Thank you for getting me across the river. Thank you for getting me from point A to point B. And now thank you for going to help somebody else so that I can get to point Z. There's a story that I know you've all heard 100 times, but it really bears repeating because it is just so perfect. The woman comes home, the wife comes home from her day at work to her stay-at-home husband, and she's brought a beautiful roast, a beautiful, magnificent roast. And she gives it to her husband, who then prepares the evening meal and cuts the sides off the roast and puts it in the pan. And she asks him, honey, why do you do that? Why do you always do that? You always, and she goes, and the husband said, I don't know. It's just the way my mom always did it. Well, let's go ask your mom. They went to his mother. And he said, Mom, why is it you cut the sides of the roast off every time you cook a roast? I don't know. It's just the way Grandma always did it. Well, let's go ask Grandma. When we go ask Grandma, Grandma, why is it every time you cook a roast, you cut the sides of the roast off? And she said, well, it's because the pan I had was too small, and the roast wouldn't fit in the pan, so I just cut the sides off so that it could cook in the pan that I had. How many rituals are we carrying forward, and we don't even understand why we're doing them? I'm saying the pan represents your consciousness, and you have inherited a consciousness from the ancestors, from your father, your mother, your grandmother, your grandfather. And if you have not evolved the pan, the consciousness of what you were living in, and you're just living the same life, you haven't honored your ancestors. We are on an evolutionary process, and if you're living the same life as your grandparents, you have not evolved. There's probably sacred cows somewhere in there that you can investigate and look at. Open the pan. Now, the human ego, remember I said ego, E-G-O, edging God out. We'll look at giving up the pan as a loss. The word sacrifice is the most misunderstood word on the planet. Oh, we think it's about killing and about destruction. If you go back to the etymology of the word sacrifice, it means to make sacred. And the Hebrew word for sacrifice is kirban, K-I-R-B-A-N, which means to come closer. So sacrifice is not about death, it's about life. Giving up the sacred cow is about coming into closer and more beautiful and powerful alignment with the sacred of all creation, the sacred of you. Yes, the Christ is born by putting the boat down. The Christ is born by getting a new pan. It is not about dying. It is about making yourself holy and sacred, that you are worthy of your ancestors, you are worthy of your father and your mother, which is the presence and power of God doing business as you. The sacred cows are keeping you awful darn small. Now you raise the elevated consciousness from the ego Giving up the pan is growth. It's a stretching of consciousness. Giving up the boat not only creates good for you, but it leaves the boat for somebody else to get across the river because it's going to be needed. And if you're carrying it, it won't be there for somebody else. One thing that I said today, one thing, that's all I'm asking you to consider. One idea stuck in your craw. One notion really got under your skin today. I'm asking you to have the eyes and the ears to hear it, not through the human ego filter. Our master teacher Jesus constantly said, listen with a deeper place. See with a deeper reality in spirit. I'm going to give you this as the final scripture for the day. It's from Matthew chapter 13. And Jesus is quoting from the ancient Hebrew scriptures from Isaiah. It's almost a direct quote from Isaiah chapter 6. So that tells me that this is a process that has been happening since the beginning of time. Letting go of sacred cows is not something new. It's part of the human evolution. Go ahead and read this with me. Hearing you will hear and shall not understand. Seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of the people have grown dull. Pause there for a second. Where in your life has life become dull? Stagnant. Because of the patterns that you're holding on to. Follow the master teacher's way. Let's continue. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. They should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. The Christ of your being is speaking loudly. Turn. Make a shift. Let go of the horns. Open the corral and free those things that are now owning you, that you no longer own. They're no longer tools. They're owning your life. And look out, because the Christ of who you are is more magnificent than anything you can even imagine in this moment. The Buddha nature, the Atman, I don't care what you call it. I'm going to call it Matt Icard the Great. Matt Icard, I want to free you. I want to see you so free from the bonds and the chains that have kept you captive that you'll be standing up here and glow so magnificent. I don't know why I'm picking on you. You're just glowing today. Is today your birthday? Happy birthday, my friend. And I love that just magically happened because guess what? Today is a birthday. From the higher consciousness, the higher vibration, every one of you can have a birthday right now. Celebrate an awareness, a consciousness, a bigger pan, the boat down. You're almost there to enlightenment. So happy birthday to each and every one of you, because you have the eyes and the ears. Verily, 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 I say unto you, stop playing small. Let's go make some hamburger or veggie burgers at the altar of the evolution of not only you as an individual, but the human race that absolutely demands right now that we stop playing small and let go of the crap, the cow pies that are in our trail that are absolutely no longer necessary. Let's take this idea into meditation.